Hello, and welcome to 360 Coaching with premier approaches to teaching and learning. Today, I have with me Mr. Steve Ventura. I'm super excited he is here with you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks so much for having me do this. I really appreciate it. I'm an educator just like everybody else. I started off as a very humble physical education teacher, then went into special ed and then to administration. And I've done just about everything K-12 all the way to a superintendency. I did a superintendency for 4 years. And then about 10 years ago, I started doing full-time consulting, really about creating really positive teacher and leadership profiles. I've been doing that the last 10 years, and I've been loving all of it. And one of the most popular things I do is teacher clarity.
Wow. I guess I came to know you through Twitter, and just some of your work is just so inspiring because you inspire instructional leaders and, just learning and leadership. So thank you for all the work that you do. You're pretty amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to sharing this. And, you have a great format here. If you need any clarification while we're going through this, please, we can discuss it all out. But it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Yay. So here we go. Teacher clarity from ideas to inspiration by the Steve Ventura.
And so I think the role I took on after talking with you, Cassandra, was how can we help instructional coaches be really good consumers of this so they can show the folks that they're mentoring how to do this. So teacher clarity is really about clearly articulating with the kids what has to be done so they can monitor themselves. Best thing about teacher clarity is it allows kids to assess their own learning as opposed to thinking the teacher is the fountain of all knowledge all day long. So it's a really nice way to get them to think more metacognitively. And so I'll just show what I would say to an instructional coach is, here's how you can get your teachers to do this. And that would kind of be the attitude today. Now, teacher clarity involves a lot of things like learning progressions, feedback, and assessment. And normally this would be a full day, seminar, but today we'll just focus on success criteria, and we can do that in a relatively short amount of time. And so when we get into it, I have a couple of worked examples so people can see how this works. So this is a little bit about myself. I'm I formed this company called Advanced Collaborative Solutions, and so I have done all these things, and I look at this, I'm like, wow, I can't remember all of the different things I've been asked to do.
And you do professional development, you do everything. So
yeah. Well, and we can stay in touch like you and I do on Twitter and LinkedIn, and my Instagram is Steve Ventura _ ACS. All this is going to be available, so it's not important for anybody to write things down right now, but those are the social media links. And the other thing is just, we've got to talk about this. I'm coming live to you from California. Yeah. I'm in an area called San Luis Obispo, halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so, where else am I going to do this? I'm not even allowed to leave my house yet. So, I have. But anyway, next time, Cassandra, we'll bring everybody out here. And we'll do it live.
Can't wait.
Right? And the other thing is that the things that you kind of mentioned are on my website. This is important because people can access more things about clarity on the website. So it's steveventura.com. And you'll be able to see when you go there, there is a way to join a mailing list. You can follow me. It's always letting people know where am I going to be or what am I writing, what am I blogging. So you'd be the first to know on that. But it's not a whole lot of just sales. It's about the things that we offer. Like, for instance, on the website, I think you read a couple of these blogs. The one that I really liked was the one we talked about, distance learning should not become the new normal. And this is where, it's not what you think. It's not an attack on technology. It's about how it really spread equity apart because some kids had access and some kids did not.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be something that wasn't that great, but we had to do it because we were thrown into it. So we have that on the website. And one of the things I told Cassandra as well is everybody will get a copy of the handout on the left. 15 pages tells you how to do everything. And then you'll get all the slides as well. So how's that, right?
Love freebies and goodies. I think teachers always eat up these great things.
Right. So who's your friend now? So let's get into it. One of the things in the handout, I'll show you a couple of worked examples. I'll also give you a really nice tool to use that involves Webb's depth of knowledge, all the verbs that you can use to write success criteria. And then I have some little tips and key points sheets that you can use long after the presentation that can help you create your own success criteria. So let's start off with a definition. These are my three favorite. Two are from Shirley Clark. One is from Professor John Hattie of Visible Learning. And I like the middle one right now is my favorite from Shirley Clark. And she says, in order to have a maximum impact, success criteria need to be known by teachers first. So that's the spirit of today. Like, how can we take a standard and deconstruct it so the teachers understand how to create the success criteria? So instructional coaches, this is where you get a chance to really help them understand what's in their standard. Just because the Common Core has been out for 10 years, don't assume everybody understands what's actually in those standards, correct? Mm-hmm. So, and John Hattie says that it's what we're looking for. I also like this definition because I want kids to be able to self-assess their own work and judge whether or not they're proficient. Mm. And so this gives them a chance to do this. So a couple of those definitions, and then I can show you a couple of just some main, this is the issue with me for success criteria. We want students to know whether or not they're achieving a specific learning intention. Like, are they making progress? And can they determine themselves whether or not they're doing well? To me, that's an assessment capable learner, someone who can assess their own work. And I think that's really what many teachers are shooting for. But in the spirit of this, instructional coaches, you have to understand that we can't ask students to do things until they're engaged. So success criteria help kids engage them, and they actually have more ability to track their own progress. So that's the spirit of success criteria. No, and it takes practice.
I think just some things, I'm just thinking, oh my God, my mind is racing. And I'm thinking, like, from the things that we put on the bulletin boards to how we assess them and how our students are internalizing it. Do they know where they're going? So no, I love it. Keep going.
Yeah, so it just takes a little practice, Cassandra, and then we can do this. The thing is this, after I show teachers and coaches about success criteria, I always ask people, what can change in schools when we focus more on these types of issues? And the thing I'm always reminding my education friends is, instead of trying to perfect the perfect grading policy or the perfect homework policy, you have to ask yourself, do those things really make a difference in terms of learning? I want to double the speed of progress for my kids. So this is something that makes a difference. I see a lot of teachers labor over grades and homework. I'm like, forget that. Let's talk about how to make a difference in the classrooms. Well, this is what it looks like. I mean, when I do a workshop with teachers, we take a standard and we restate it so it's more applicable to the kids. In other words, the teacher would take it and call it a learning intention, and they wouldn't write the whole standard. They would just restate it so a student could understand it. So a lot of my teacher friends would say, well, then where's all the detail in the standard? You left a lot out. And I say, well, don't worry about that, because the detail is in the success criteria. Do you see it? Look at all the detail there.
I love it.
Yeah. So I just take the standard and ask teachers to restate it so it's kid friendly. But then when we get to the success criteria, we make a really purposeful connection to the best verbs to start the sentence. I want everybody to know I love I can statements. You don't see them here because the purpose of this activity was to select the best verb first, then put I can in front of that. So a lot of people will say, well, you don't use I can statements. And the only reason you don't see them here is because we're talking about the foundation. So instructional coaches, for teachers too, these kids can hit any target as long as it stands still for them for a couple of days, from Rick Stiggins. So we don't put up new success criteria every single day on new posters. Those kids need to work through. There were 5 or 6 of them on the previous screen. So here's a great idea from a school I work with in Brooklyn. This is PS 249. And watch what they've done here. This is beautiful. They took a standard, Reading for Literature .3, and they vertically aligned it from kindergarten to 5th grade. I love this. They got together by grade levels and said, okay, these are the most important standards we want to show in our classrooms and have kids, create and follow the criteria for success. So you can see the difference in cognitive demand. In kindergarten, they only have to identify. In 1st grade, they have to start describing. So what the teachers discovered is, what does the standard look like in the grade level before their grade level? And that helped them write their own success criteria all the way through. So now they have this beautifully vertically aligned standard with success criteria K through 5. And then these go up in the classrooms.
No,
So
I love this. I love this. So let me think of this. So we're thinking as from a coaching standpoint, we can do so much with this. This
yeah.
is professional development. We can kind of look and grab, vertical and horizontal alignment.
Yeah.
We all are in sync, which some schools are not. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
Well, and then you talk about equity. Mm-hmm. And now kids are getting access to success criteria. And the best thing about the PS 249 is, as students matriculate from one grade level to another, classroom to classroom, they say things like, oh, I remember we did this last year. So they're familiar with seeing that. This is a great one. I love this one. Now, this is a client I've been working with for a few years. This is over in Hawaii. And so this teacher has learning intentions for reading, writing, math, and science and social studies. And this is really amazing. You can see the success criteria. She has decided just to use verbs. They're I can statements, but they're verbs. And then on the right, the students are moving their magnets just so they can self-assess where they are with each one of these intentions. Isn't that great?
Oh my God, they know, the teachers know, principals know, and even parent-teacher conferences. This is an area of discussion. This is nice.
Yeah, so I guess I just have to do quickly where the research came from. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked on the phone last week about John Hattie and Visible Learning. And so I was one of the consultants with Visible Learning and worked with Professor Hattie. And just to help our coaches understand that this research is the largest summary of educational research that's ever been conducted. 90,000 independent studies of research data that involve 300 million students. And then Professor Hattie just rank ordered. This is a control versus treatment group, Cassandra. It's like, well, what's the difference between kids who get success criteria in terms of achievement and kids who didn't? And so he said that success criteria, based on his research, had the potential to considerably accelerate student achievement because he compared control versus treatment groups. Nice. So what was fascinating is in the book, success criteria got an effect size of 0.75, teacher clarity. And what that really is 75% of a standard deviation. So think of a bell-shaped curve, right? It's on the fringe. It's like very impactful. And so he defined it. John Hattie said that you can accomplish clarity when you write learning intentions, success criteria, and learning progression. So we'll just do success criteria today. But the research is pretty solid. And I just want people to understand, what does 0.75 really mean? Well, coaches, this is a great message for your teachers, because what 0.75 really means is that it's a high impact instructional strategy, and it could actually help kids progress 9 months further than kids who never received it. That's pretty solid.
That is.
Yeah. So we're talking about doubling the speed of learning in one instructional year, right? Yeah. And a lot of kids need that. So this is, the foundation for this. The other thing is that it helps kids raise their own self-efficacy, Cassandra. The effect size for student self-efficacy is 0.92, which literally means that they start building their own confidence about their own learning, which is what we want. And so the higher their self-efficacy, the more confident they are to go after success criteria. So the thing is, with teachers, we have to understand that the fate of our kids depends on our mind frames about them. And so here's where we get this big advantage. And so now I'm going to drop a couple truth bombs, and here comes the first one. We can't ask kids to analyze design stuff if we're only teaching them how to identify and recite. You have to really understand levels of cognition and complexity when you write success criteria. So we can't make it too low and we can't make it too high. We've got to make it just right. So that's why I show teachers, this is more common for a lot of teachers and instructional coaches. This is called process success criteria, and then I'm going to do product success criteria. Process is not based on any single standard. It's based on the climate in the classroom. And this is from Shirley Clark. She said that there were 6 things that help kids when teachers use process success criteria. I've seen this a million times in several different classrooms. Teachers are good at this. And they say things like, hey, before you're done, check off the list. Did you do these things? So this is a great way to introduce success criteria to them. first start with process, then go to product, right? And so this is very self-explanatory. You know, a lot of kids like to finish work really quick. They don't take time to read the directions. They turn in work that's subpar. And so process success criteria is designed to keep kids more on task. That's just a quick example of what that is. It's very helpful. And of course, people who get this video can study it even more. But let me show you what I've done with a real standard, okay? So I'm practicing, right? This is my first introduction. So if you're an instructional coach, here's how I would show a teacher to do this. I picked 2 standards from reading for informational text, 4.2 and 7.2, 4th grade and 7th grade. And first thing I do, Cassandra, is bold the verbs. I just go and I bold the verbs. I want to know what are the skills in this standard that the students have to do. And then once I bold the verbs, I start getting an idea of how I want to start my success criteria. Now, this is very elementary. It's like just beginning, right? So for 4th grade, I wanted them to determine the main idea of a text because I taught it. Then I wanted them to explain it. And then I wanted to summarize. I did the same thing with 7th grade, but then I made a little parenthetical DOK. Can you see it? So then I put this thing like, well, what level is determine and analyze? How complex is that? So sometimes I just, now I don't show that to kids. I want teachers to know, where is the verb? How complex is this? So what's happening here is that in the 4th grade one, I got feedback that said, well, you shouldn't stress quantity. So you ask the kids to do this in 2 to 3 sentences and 3 to 5 sentences. And I said, well, the only reason I put it in there is because they always ask how long everything has to be.
Yeah.
So I still have them explaining. I just told them to explain it in 2 to 3 sentences, and I still had them summarizing. So sometimes if they ask constantly, and they do, how long does this have to be? Then I usually try to work it in. But so far, does this make sense to you, Cassandra? You see what I did with the verbs? Just put it out very, very simple. And that way the kids could say, well, let's see, I got 3 out of 4. Let me go back and fix the last one. Right. So the first thing I do is bold the verbs. And you can see that I've done that with RI 4.2, and then I did it with RI 7.2. And one of the things I recommend to instructional coaches when they do this is to pick more rigorous standards. The more verbs they have, the more easy it is to write the success criteria. So the more complex the standard, almost sometimes the easier it is to write the criteria for success. But it doesn't mean we wouldn't pick other standards that are foundation. And so you can see what I did with that 7th grade model. I just looked at my 3 verbs, determine, analyze, and summarize, and I made sure I included all of those in the criteria for success, right? They have to be there. And so now I have kids seeing this, and they can determine whether or not they have met the criteria for success. So a lot of times they'll ask the teachers, did I do this right? Is this correct? And I would just say, well, go back and look at the criteria for success. Make sure you've covered everything, right? In that handout, I'm going to give everybody, they get all of the 57 verbs from Webb's Depth of Knowledge. So this will help them write their criteria for success. Yes. So Cassandra, all I have to do is look at my verb and then find out what column it's in. And then I know how complex my standard is, right?
Yep.
Right. So this is the little cheat sheet I put together so people could start saying like, well, what verbs can I use for my success criteria? Sometimes you can use verbs that aren't in the standard as well to get kids to start something. So this is a lovely little jump start. So if I'm an instructional coach, what teachers really need to know, coaches, is the gray area. They have to understand what DOK1 really means. It's only recalling something. It's just memorize something. And then DOK level 4 is like multi-paragraph writing, so we can't overcode stuff. Many teachers label things DOK level 4 because it looks hard. Yeah. But that's not what depth of knowledge is about. It's about complexity. So this is a great little tool. I use it all the time when I write success criteria. This is a wonderful sample from a 6th grade teacher. This teacher took the standard and made it really simple for the students. But then that success criteria is so beautiful. Yes. Because there's no stone left unturned. And you can see there's a little staircase to complexity. First, they have to identify and describe, summarize, and then write. Yep. It's perfect. I mean, I asked her, how does this work in your class? And she told me the kids are turning in better work. Good. The work is of higher quality because they're more clear about what they have to do. So here's a couple more examples. I have the learning intention on the left and the success criteria on the right. And you can see now I started doing a little bit more things. The learning intention says understand, but I want the kids to be able to define, structure and function, and then explain.
Yeah.
And the other one says represent and solve, but I do want them to explain what it is. That's kind of, some of the things that you can use. They could still put represent in there as success criteria, but there's so many options here. And so as coaches walk their teachers through this, they should be able to really determine whether or not the criteria for success matches the rigor of the standard. I love this one. This is a great, talk about quick progress checks. Here are 6 success criteria for representing data using graphs. Now the kids can't do all 6 in one day, but what I saw this teacher do was she told the students, hey, listen, if you drew a picture graph today, why don't you go up to the criteria for success and initial it?
Wow.
So we know. So now they're looking at their own work and then going up and checking off their work. Isn't that fabulous?
Isn't it? And then, just checking for understanding.
Yeah.
Just know where they are. And, even coaches can model these strategies and share it with other teachers in the building so we all can be on the same page. I love these ideas.
Yeah, and they're so interactive. And so here's what the coaches are going to get in the handout. I put together calibration for how to write criteria. Like this is the success criteria for success criteria. So you have to identify key concepts. You have to avoid subjective language like some, few, a little. That's too subjective. It's got to be much more objective.
Yes.
I'm going to show you a little secret I put together about how to write really good success criteria, and with a couple more samples. So if I was working with a teacher, Cassandra, and you and I are coaches, we would take a look at their success criteria and then tell them to make sure they included those things right on our screen in their own criteria for success. Then they know they have a pretty good sample, right? So this is a great tool for coaches.
Yes.
Because they can have the teachers write the criteria for success, and then together they can go over and say, okay, did we meet this criteria?
Yeah.
So another really good tool would help them. And so here's the other truth bomb. I mentioned it before. I always tell people that I train with this, let's just focus on the first word before we start writing I cans and I wills. Let's just get the verb right first. And the more familiar you become with this, the better it is. So in that handout, I just pulled off 16 or 18 verbs that I thought would make really good verbs for success criteria. Or there's way more. But I want coaches to tell teachers that whatever verb they use, it's got to make a student say something, do something, make something, or write something.
Oh, yeah.
And so some verbs don't ask to do that. Some aren't as explicit as this. So your coaches and people listening to this will get it, all of those verbs, and they get a chance to kind of write this. So I have a couple more samples. Here's another one. This one is like key points, like how to write it. So the standard is in the black box. And this is around a 6th grade or 7th grade standard, when we learned about the fall of the Roman Empire. And in this particular standard, the students have to pick one of those things and describe how it had contributed to a Roman's daily life. So I said, well, let's just use technology, okay? So they would have to describe a technological contribution, right? Then they would have to explain how it improved their daily life. And I did include a length. I just said include 2 to 3 sentences. Now here's what's the next little key point here, Cassandra, is sometimes I include other details not in the standard, but I know they need it. The last success criteria says, can you make a connection to your own personal experience?
Yes.
And how this technological contribution improved your life today. See what I did?
Yes, connected to real world experience.
Yeah. So everybody who's watching this gets this complete sample about how to write this.
Nice.
And then I have another little sample with additional criteria for writing, rubrics and success criteria. So like I said before, it takes practice. And I'll show you how I get kids to learn how to self-assess, and then we're almost done here. So let me explain this. So here's that standard.
Mhm.
and I made it into an assessment question. So the kids have to name a technological contribution invented by Rome, in 2 to 3 sentences, explain how it improved their life, and so forth. Now, one of the things I do with students is, look what I did in the first sentence, in addition to the development of architecture and aqueducts. Now, what I did there was I took those away from them because they're the most common things they talk about. And it was just a little mind trick just to get them to think a little more, because they always talk about architecture and aqueducts because most of the textbooks show that, mostly. So I said, hey, I know you already know this. Now you have to pick another one. And it just gets them thinking a little bit more. So here's the success criteria. A contribution, 2 to 3 sentences, how to improve their life.
Yep.
Right? So now I'll make a holistic scoring guide. These are awesome. I would put this right on their paper. Okay. So when I write scoring guides, this is classic holistic. First thing I do is create the achieve criteria. Like if you did these 3 things, you're achieving the standard.
Yep.
Right? But instead of writing all the things that they would have to do, that, like, instead of telling them, well, you didn't put this, you didn't put that, I just said developing means you only got 2 out of 3. So go back and add the other one, right?
Yes.
And beginning means you got less than 2. So you need to add 2 more. So straight away, I've already set them up. Like, I only have to write 2 boxes for this scoring guide, just achieve and just exceeds or excels. I don't have to worry about developing. It's quantitative. I just said, yeah, you need a little bit more. But look what I did. I said, if you can make a connection to your personal experience, that's excelling now. Now you're going above and beyond. Does it make sense?
Yes, because I'm just thinking of like grade level meetings, all you know, assessments together, and just coming up with this criteria all in one. So it's not this class does this and this class does that. So this is perfect.
Yeah. So here's the best part about it. Coaches, you can show this to your teachers that you're mentoring, and they can do this with their students. I tell kids, why don't you get out your blue pencil or your blue pen and underline all the criteria for achieve in blue. And before you turn your work in, please underline in blue where you did that. That way, Cassandra, they are now self-assessing themselves.
They are.
Do you believe it?
Yes, yes, they are.
And then I tell teachers, well, let's see if we can get them to do all of them. So why don't you buy them an orange pencil and tell them to underline the excels in orange, and then underline in orange where they did that on the paper. And now I'm creating kids who can self-assess themselves, because they would rather have us do it. And I'm like, no, this is for you. This is for you to do it. So one question I get all the time about success criteria, and this is really, it's because teachers care so much about their kids and they're empathetic. They'll say things like, well, I've got kids on IEPs or kids that are really struggling, and should I change the success criteria for them? Well, I was reading Shirley Clark, and she said, no. Shirley Clark says, before you change the success criteria, why don't you change the instruction? A little more differentiation. Before we start believing they can't do it, how about if we kind of ramp up our practice to see if they can? So I'm not a big fan of creating different criteria for success, because kids have different struggles. I might make it look different, but I wouldn't lower my expectations for them. And even though the intentions are good, when we start messing around with success criteria for kids we don't think can do it, that is called a soft bigotry of low expectations.
Then we're in the
right.
So
we have to avoid that all the way around. So this is the thing. Now we've kind of gone through it, and then, you know, you and I can talk about this and see, I mean, the key messages, what would be the next steps, and what further learning and support would coaches need? What do you think a coach could walk away from this, Cassandra? I mean,
there's so many things that's going through my mind, especially with, you know, taking assessments and really giving students those, you know, things that they can use, those objectives that they understand, to where they can actually assess their own growth. I mean, and then the displays of work, how they can showcase their work, you know, on the bulletin board, to have success, to also know that you're not alone. Everybody is working through this. We're working through this together as a team. I love all these ideas.
Yeah. And so for me, like, next steps for me as an instructional coach is to help teachers select standards that are very, very significant. Like, there's supporting standards and then there's priority standards. So they should take those standards that are really essential and practice with those first, just because they're very important for kids to learn before they go into the next grade level.
Mhm.
And then number 3 is the support is just practice.
Yeah.
So I'm always telling people, like, don't be afraid to try something new. It takes practice. You have to practice with it. But I always say, don't be afraid to try something new, because amateurs built the Ark, professionals built the Titanic. So you got to take a little bit of a risk once in a while. And it'll come. Pretty soon, if people look at the resource I sent them and study it, they'll see all those little key points and suggestions are very direct. They're super clear. So they should be able to do it.
No.
Hope this was helpful.
Oh my gosh, love. I need to go and study and practice now. I'm excited to go and dig deep to these success criteria. And
Yeah. Well, your friends and your colleagues, whoever gets a chance to look at this, are more than willing to email me. They can even send me their samples. I can give them feedback on that. So again, it's a great tool. And as I mentioned before, it's usually a longer session. But, come on, we just wanted to kind of jump into it a little bit feet first here and see what we could do.
no,
But I really appreciate this time. I hope it made sense to the people that are.
no, I love it. I think this is enough to get their feet wet. And if they want more, you have their contact information. And,
Yeah, exactly.
did that. So thank you so much. This was so great. And you guys, I hope you opt in and to his freebie. It is so important because he gave you so much content and so much information to now we can do it at our own schools.
It's a really good resource. I hope they take a look at it.
So thank you so much, Steve.
My pleasure.
And so until next time.